The following video is one of the Ask an Expert sessions hosted by Postpartum Support Toronto and Perfectly Imperfect Parent Tribe.
Hello everybody! Welcome to Ask an Expert about sex and pregnancy and postpartum and parenthood. My name is Tynan Rhea. I work as a doula, aromatherapist, and coach, and I specialize in sexuality throughout pregnancy and postpartum, so during the reproductive years. And for this segment today, I've received some questions ahead of time that I will be answering here, as well as if you need any clarification or you want to get into anything in a little more detail, or you're a little bit too nervous to ask in front of everybody, then please feel free to message me separately later. My email is tynanrhea@gmail.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at tynanrhea. So let's get started. Like I said, I had a few questions that came in ahead of time, so I'm going to start at the top and work my way through. Question number 1, and this one is a popular one. How can I get into the mood of having sex with my partner again? We still have sex somewhat regularly, but I find that I choose to do it to satisfy my partner. Oftentimes, I'm so exhausted and all I want to do is sleep. It isn't nearly as enjoyable for me as it used to be. This is totally normal. And when I say normal, I don't mean that it's okay, don't worry about it, and move on with your life. I mean that lots of people experience this when they become parents or when they have another child or they have their first child. So what's really, really important during this period is going to be open and honest communication with your partner. Having sex that feels like a chore at best can feel just kind of tiring and annoying, and at worst can feel violating and resentful in the long run. When I looked at studies of relationship satisfaction in new parents, it peaked in decline several years after rather than in the initial postpartum period. And I think a big way that we can sort of get around that or avoid having this decline in relationship satisfaction is by talking about these things when they come up. So if you're feeling too tired to have sex, then it's okay to say, I'm too tired to have sex. I don't want to have sex right now. It doesn't mean you're never going to have sex again. It just means that you didn't get what you need in order to get in the mood. There's nothing wrong with you. You're operating like a normal human being. And sex being such a physical activity, I mean, physical, emotional, spiritual for some, that's a lot to ask of a person who's super tired. So it's more than fair to say, no, I don't want to have sex tonight. I'm tired. And the ways in which your partner can help you with this is by stepping in and doing more household chores. Even if they're working throughout the week, they're not really working that 24/7 clock in the same way that you might be. So it's definitely fair to ask for more help on their part so that you can take a nap or that you can rest. And you can even say to them, look, I'd love to have sex with you, but you know what would be super hot? If you did the dishes first. Being tired alone can cause clinical depression, and they've studied this. So being depressed, being exhausted, being tired, being anxious, or being overworked with all the new responsibilities of parenthood is a very understandable reason for not wanting to have sex. And that can get worse over time if you're unable to have open and honest conversations with your partner about the realities of that. And that means that both yourself and your partner need to be open to hearing the other person and how they're feeling and finding ways to work around that. There's a really great book called Baby Makes Three by John Gottman and his partner, and I feel terrible not knowing her name off the top of my head. But the Gottmans have a wonderful institute that dedicated their research to couples who became parents and how that impacted their relationship and how to improve relationship satisfaction through that period. So if you're looking for a good read specifically related to this, I think that'll be a really helpful one. Now, to be fair, it's very heteronormative. So if you're in a heterosexual relationship and that's not a problem for you, then great, there's going to be no issue with this book. But if you're queer and you're not finding that it's resonating with you because of that, that's fair. I would invite you to just skip to the parts, the juicy, meaty bits where they talk about different communication strategies, because that I think is applicable to all humans. So it's a really great resource, and I think it'll really help a lot of people get through that rough patch, that initial period where they're having trouble with finding time, energy, and the communication skills to say what they need. Another thing I want to add on top of that is a thing that I found over and over and over again in the research is that a lot of women, and I say women because the research has pretty much exclusively focused on women, a lot of the women were finding that sex felt like a chore, like another thing that they just had to check off their list. And the number one predictor of resuming most sexual activity was perceptions that their partners wanted to have sex. And so there's a real disconnect between the birthing person's own sexuality. And what I mean by that is it's not selfish to say, I need this in our sex life because I'm not having any pleasure. It's not selfish to assert your sexual needs and wants. And you also don't owe anybody sex. So if you don't want to have sex, or if that kind of sex isn't going to work for you, including your partner, nobody owes each other any kind of sex. So this is where coming back to having good, open, honest communication and respectful communication with your partner is going to be really, really key. Because if you're going to find new ways of exploring sexuality under these really specific set of circumstances with these really unique obstacles, then you're going to have to find some common ground in order for it to work out. Otherwise, if you keep having sex that feels like a chore when you're exhausted, built-up resentment over time is inevitably going to deteriorate the relationship on some level. Another thing they found in one study that I thought was really interesting was that couples who were really successful or who really were able to navigate this really difficult time had priorities that were in line with one another. So that, again, we come back to having the good, open, honest communication, figuring out, okay, what's important to us right now. And if one partner is prioritizing sex and the other one isn't, or let's say neither partner is prioritizing sex but nobody knows that, or both want to prioritize sex and nobody knows that, then we can't really get anywhere. So I really can't send that one home enough. Communicating is so key. And that includes saying no to sex when you don't want to have sex and saying yes to sex when you want to have sex. Easier said than done, definitely gets better with practice, I promise. I'm going to move on to question number 2. So in this second question, there's a couple of different pieces. It goes, I'm almost 6 months postpartum and sex has been sad. Aside from having zero interest in having sex with my partner, and also no interest in masturbating myself, I have found that the inside of my vagina has zero pleasurable sensation. There is no pain, there's just nothing. Sex is pretty pointless for me. This is disappointing because sex used to be fun. My partner and I have an amazing sexual connection, and I didn't want having a baby to wreck sex. I'm not having fun, I feel no connection, and having a baby wrecked sex. My partner is extremely supportive and understanding, and I am happy about that. So, first of all, congrats that you have a partner that is supportive and that you feel that you can have open and honest communication with. I'm assuming that that's part of that. If that's not part of that, then that might be a piece that needs a little more attention. I need to say before I go any further that I'm not a doctor, and I can't honestly and truly say I know why this is happening, or I know how long it's going to happen for, or when it's going to go away, or if it will go away. But here's what I can say. Based on a survey that I sent to within my networks, about 41 people responded, and there were questions based around sex and pregnancy and postpartum. And a few other people also said that they had changes in the sensation of their vagina. Some were numb in certain spots, some felt more pain, some felt less pleasure but not pain, and there was lots of variations in sort of what the birthing experience did in terms of impacting sensation on the vulva and the vagina. And this was regardless of whether or not it was vaginal birth or C-section. And then some of these people who went on to have a second child found that in having their second child, it went back to normal or what they were used to. I have no idea why this happens. I don't know I'm certain there's an answer out there. I don't know that we're properly researching it. I haven't come across it thus yet. Most of the research that I've looked at from a gynecological obstetrics point of view has been focusing on when sexual activity resumes, which makes me call into question the gender of the people researching. But anyway, that's my own thing aside. The point is, I did a little digging. And one of the things that this person also mentioned was that they had an IUD put in after their birth. This could be a symptom of having their IUD, and then if they take out the IUD, then their vaginal sensation will eventually come back. It appears that this is possible, but very rare. It seems to be related to silicone poisoning in a malfunctioning IUD. So if you are feeling vaginal numbness after getting an IUD, whether or not you had a birth, it's really important to book an appointment with your doctor and to explore this possibility. Even if your doctor says it's really rare and I don't think it's that, I would push them a little bit. Sometimes doctors need a little pushing, especially when it comes to sexual health matters, because unfortunately, they're not always getting the best education in this realm. So, it could be the IUD that's causing the vaginal numbness. It could be nerve damage, maybe. I'm guessing, based off the fact that having a second child seemed to be sort of the fixer for some people. The other thing that this person asked was, some people suggested that they just need to find a new normal and using sex toys and a sex therapist will help. I want to answer this very carefully because on the one hand, I somewhat agree, and I'll tell you why it's somewhat and not totally. What I don't totally agree with is telling you that this is your new normal, because I don't know that this is your new normal, but this is your right now. So if this is your right now, then it definitely is worth exploring other ways of finding pleasure in your body while this is continuing to be a problem for you. I'm not convinced that this is something you'll have to live with forever, and I'm not convinced that your doctor or other healthcare providers have really advocated for you finding a solution to this problem. People that also experience this problem, the range of when the sensation in the vagina came back was pretty big. It went anywhere from about 6 to 12 months to 20 months. But again, I'm not sure why that is. So for people who maybe saw a pelvic physiotherapist, or one person went and visited a pain clinic and had a lot of success there, versus somebody who just waited for things to naturally sort of fix themselves, I'm not sure why it took some people longer than others. But I definitely don't think this is something that you have to accept as your new normal, but I definitely think it's valuable to say, what can I do in the meantime while I can't do this? There's potential for lots of different points in our lives for us to be unable to have the kinds of sex we want to have for a variety of reasons, whether we have the flu, whether we have cancer, whether we're going through menopause, or just had a child. So there's nothing wrong with expanding our imagination and sort of thinking outside of our usual practices to see what else is out there, what else is interesting, what else feels kind of fun. And that might even come in handy even after the vaginal sensation comes back. You may have learned all sorts of new things about your sexuality that you otherwise never would have known. Having said that, it's hard to get excited when you're feeling super bummed about something not working like you want it to. So I just want to honor and appreciate how frustrating that must be. I do think there's an opportunity to learn other things here, but I also don't think that it's appropriate to say, well, this is your new normal, just move on. So I encourage you to keep exploring, keep finding a specialist or some healthcare provider that can help you with this problem, and then trying to find other ways of experiencing pleasure in the meantime. And that can look like anything from exploring new ways of masturbating to exploring new ways of engaging with your partner. Not all sex looks like sex. For example, and I often say in my home, my partner and I are constantly engaging in sexuality, and yet we don't have a ton of what a lot of people might call sex. And maybe it's mean, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what that means, because really the only point I'm trying to make is that it's invaluable to expand our definition of what sex, sexuality, sensuality, and pleasure can mean and is. So that's all I can really say on the topic for now, without going into too much detail about relationship dynamics and sort of the structure of your day and other ways you feel about your body or your own sexuality. But I hope that gives you a starting point with some things that you might be sort of struggling with through this period. And like I said, if you have any additional questions or you want clarification on anything, please feel free to contact me at tynanrea@gmail.com or on Twitter and Instagram at tynanrea.